Today's LiveOnWeb episode, Masterclass on Autonomous Trucking, is sponsored by Freightliner Cascadia.
Introducing the new Cascadia. It's trucking down to a science.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're back with you live from our offices in Arlington, Virginia to talk about one of the most exciting topics in trucking today, autonomous and platooning technologies. Earlier this month, Transport Topics led a panel discussion at American Trucking Association's annual conference that featured some of the biggest names operating in this emerging space. The feedback at the conference, as well as the questions we received prior to today's program, has been nothing short of overwhelming. We've received well more than 100 questions and have shaped today's program to answer many of them. If you're watching live, you can interact with us by emailing share@ttnews.com or by commenting within this article page. In a few moments, we will be joined by TT Technology Editor Seth Clevenger, who will provide an overview of the companies developing these technologies. First, though, I want to bring in Fred Andersky. He is Director of Customer Solutions for the Controls Group and Government Affairs at Bendix Commercial Vehicle Systems. He holds a Class A CDL and often demonstrates advanced safety technologies, including stability control, collision mitigation, air disc brakes, and platooning. I have been fortunate enough to take part in several of the demonstrations. They are always educational and fun. Okay, Fred. As we review the questions, it revealed some uncertainty among viewers about the different technologies. Oftentimes, the word driverless is being used. I know that you view driverless as something far different than automation or autonomous. So why don't we start simply? Can you explain these terms a little bit and give us some definitions about what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure, Neil, and thank you for having me. This is really an exciting topic, but as you noted, it can be a confusing topic, especially with the way words get thrown around. So words really do matter in this case. So when we take a look at the words we're talking about, we really need to think of two areas. The first is automation, okay? And automation still means that we're doing stuff to bring in additional help, but a human is still involved. And that's where we get automated from. In fact, it's one of my favorites in terms of a word that has a definition that requires another definition. So when you think automated, think automation. But the key thing is it's reducing human intervention, but a human still involved in it. So when we get then to autonomous and driverless, they really mean the same thing. Okay, we're putting in systems that do not have a human involved. And so a lot of times autonomous gets used as autonomous applications when really they're automated applications because we still have a driver. Now NHTSA and really SAE came out with 6 levels of automation, 0 being no automation at all the way up to level 5, which is autonomous. Now the easy way to distinguish between these levels, okay? Levels 0 through 4 still involve a driver in some way. By the time you get to 4, it's a lot less, but there are still going to be situations with those level 4 systems where a driver may be involved.
Level 5, that would be sort of like this Google car that we hear about, no steering wheel, no driver.
Right, level
like
5
that's
is
5 and not what we're going to be talking about today.
Level 5 is driverless. So really the things that we'll talk about today kind of fall into the level 2 and 3 areas, so to speak. So those really kind of get into the definitions. So automated and autonomous. Now, as we look moving forward, okay, the path to autonomous vehicles, and we talked about these 5 levels, but the other side of it involves communications. okay? Vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure communications, more information into the system, as we'll talk about, will become important. So keep in mind those levels, keep in mind automated versus autonomous/driverless.
Okay, so first takeaway here, driverless, there may be a Google car, some others out there, but when we're talking about trucking, anything involving driverless, which decades out in the future, a little bit later I hope to get to maybe going back to the panel I referenced, what Otto, they were purchased by Uber, one of their futuristic visions, but we're talking decades down the road at the panel, and we had talked, Sean Ward of Daimler said it was pretty clear that this is not driverless. So that would be one, the words can be a bit interchanged, but what you see on the screen right now is a vision we'll get to later about what something may look like. We're talking 30, 40 years down the road, and that might be optimistic. So just a little teaser there, something I hope to get to a little later in the program, because that is interesting, but again, this is not driverless what we're going to be talking about. So we have the definitions now. There are building blocks toward this path of autonomous automated, and really those are safety technologies, active systems, advanced systems. I know that's very much what Bendix, what you're involved in. So why don't we take the next step here from the definitions and walk us through what I like to call, and I stole this term, so forgive me, but the building blocks of where this is heading.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with kind of the basics and what we call the 5 I's of active safety and future autonomy. And when you think about any system, whether it's a stability system, a collision mitigation system, or an autonomous vehicle, these 5 I's are important in that development. And the first I is information. And this is what comes into the vehicle either from sensors on the vehicle, or it can also be information such as GPS or vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure communications that come into the vehicle. The second I is intelligence. This is the smarts that exist in the electronic control unit. These are the algorithms that are going to take that information, process it, and determine if we need to have the third I in intervention. So in intervention, what we're doing is we're doing speed and direction variation to help mitigate a particular situation. So today with stability, for example, we are able to intervene by applying the brakes on the steer, drive, and trailer axles. And we can also help the driver, because of the way we apply the brakes on the steer axle, to help the vehicle go where they need it to go. It's not steering per se, but it does help. Then insight. All these systems are providing information or data that comes off the system that the fleet can use to help train drivers and do more. Last I is integrity. And quite frankly, this is the one we added the most recently. It used to be just the 4 I's. But the 5th I, integrity, really ties to ensuring that the other 4 I's are delivered and working with confidence and pure, if you will. We're avoiding outside influences such as hack systems. You know, it involves cybersecurity to make sure everything's going to work the way it's supposed to work. So when we start with those, then we get into kind of where we see the evolution of these technologies going. And it all starts with, it all started with ABS when it really comes down to it. With ABS, what ABS did for us is it gave truck braking brains and sight. For 100 years before, braking was a mechanical function. Step on the pedal, wire moves, air flows, liquid moves, the brakes apply. Now we added an electronic control unit, the brains, and we added wheel speed sensors, which gave us the insight. More information into the system. As we move forward, we add additional sensors. So stability, we added a steer angle, lateral acceleration, and yaw rate sensor. And we were able to have full stability or electronic stability control. In 2009, in our evolution, we added a radar that gave us wingman active cruise with braking, or adaptive cruise control as it's generically known. Now we're not only helping the driver in stability situations, because the system's built on top of stability, but we're helping them in maintaining a safe following distance behind a forward vehicle. Add some more intelligence to the system, and we get Wingman Advanced in 2011. Now we have adaptive cruise control and collision mitigation to help the driver. And then finally, last year in 2015, we added an additional sensor to the system, a camera and a radar that work together to help do more to help drivers mitigate collisions. So for example, with Wingman Advanced, we were pretty comfortable giving the driver an alert on a stationary vehicle. With Wingman Fusion, we're more confident that we will brake for the stationary vehicle.
So you mentioned braking. I know we have a couple of videos that we're going to run through fairly quickly. Why don't we take a look at the first one? This is, you're behind the wheel, if I remember correctly here. Why don't we take a look at this braking demo, and we'll come back here with Fred to tell us about it.
One of the scenarios that Volvo Active Driver Assist can help you out with is the case of a stationary vehicle in your lane of travel. We're going to approach our line of cars here at about 25 miles an hour, and we will let the system intervene for us. Don't do this at home, because this doesn't replace your safe driving practices. Again, this is Volvo Active Driver Assist stationary vehicle braking scenario, a situation we hope you never find yourself in. So what that video was showing was the Volvo Active Driver Assist, which is engineered by Bendix, built on the Fusion system, using the camera, which you actually saw up in the window, and the radar, which is down on the front bumper, to help determine that we had a stationary vehicle in front of us. The information was cross-checked, and we applied the brakes and were able to bring the truck to a stop before hitting the stationary vehicle. More information into the system allows us to do more to help drivers in more situations. And as we look going down the path to autonomous vehicle, that's exactly what's happening. We're more sensors, more information into the system that allows us to do more to help in more situations.
I want to stay, real good information. I want to stay on this safety technology for a minute before we talk about where this is heading. As I mentioned in the beginning, I've done a couple demos with Fred. I've always left with so many takeaways in my head. Sometimes it can be hard for me to digest them. One, most recent one was in August up in Washington State at PACCAR, a technical center up there. I was in the, Fred is in the passenger seat here. I was actively taking it in while just holding, I guess, my iPhone here. The stopping distance alerts, you can feel the braking here. Why don't we take a look at this? I found it very interesting.
Stuff will come through the driver interface unit. Our first maneuvers are going to be following distance alerts. And following distance alerts are designed to let the driver know when he or she is getting too close to the vehicle in front. We have two, above 37 miles per hour is our highway mode. Below 37 miles an hour is our city mode. What's different is in the city mode, we do a closer and closest alert. So our second level alert and our third level alert. And if Charlie backs away and comes back at him, we'll do alerts. In this particular scenario, we're running at 1.5 and 1 second, so that's 1 second following distance. Above 37 miles per hour, we provide a third alert. So think of it as close, closer, closest in terms of alerts. In this particular scenario, it'll be at 2 seconds, and the closer alert again at 1.5, and the closest alert at 1. We will have some braking throughout, so please brace yourself as necessary. There's our first alert, our second alert, and our third alert. Have a second. We will also have our impact alert. Impact alert, let Charlie know that he's getting a little close. The system realized we were going to have a collision and automatically applied the brakes. Charlie's foot was on the throttle, so we cut throttle, applied the brakes. Charlie likes this maneuver, so we're going to do it again.
So that demo went on for 4 or 5 additional minutes. We saw a number of the different technologies as we went around the track. Something like that, and that braking, that's done automatically. That's a point to show that hopefully it won't get used, but it can brake, it can prevent the collision in many instances, if not prevent it, at least make it far less severe than it might otherwise be. Something like that, a demo like that, is far more jarring when you brake than anything I've done in a platooning or autonomous driving test, where you expect some bells and whistles, and it's so smooth and simple. You're sort of saying, is this all there is to it? But it takes demos like what you just saw to really understand how much goes in, what's involved in this technology. Rather than just hearing it from me, in 2015, I did another demo that Fred and Bendix was involved with. This one included a couple UPS drivers, one Paul Seville. He's a member of America's Road Team. Last October, a part of a LiveOnWeb, I interviewed him on a number of different subjects, and we talked about the day we spent together. And someone who's spent years on the road of safe driving thought it was interesting to circle back a year later and take a look at what his feeling was as he tested out some of these safety technologies we've been talking about. So let's take a look at that clip.
I was reluctant about doing some of the things that they were saying, hey, go and do. We had the instructor do it first.
Yes.
But
and very detailed instructions in a very controlled environment. There were a lot of safety measures in place, but we had to be a little risky to test the technologies out.
Exactly. So it really went against everything that I've trained and my driving methods. And so that's where I was reluctant at, is that and I mentioned that the guy, the instructor said, you can go faster. And I remember one of my comments was, this is very unnatural to me. And I remember you making a comment about that. And I tried going as fast as I could, but I just wasn't going to go as fast as that instructor. But even then, I was still able to test out these safety features. The vehicle stability system. That was one where we just made a hard U-turn kind of, and the brakes, the active braking would come on and selectively activate certain brakes to prevent a rollover.
Right.
So I didn't do it as fast as that instructor, but I made some of them come on.
And watching it from when you weren't in the vehicle to watch it from the sidelines, you really got a sense as to preventing the rollover. Right. It was a very different experience being inside the vehicle, where you could sort of feel it, but then to witness how dramatic the rollover could have been without the additional set of safety wheels to prevent it from going over, really opened my eyes.
And one of the most amazing parts of it was when they had that dummy car, and it wasn't an actual car, it was just one made up, looked like a dummy car. And we drove up behind it, I think maybe 35 miles an hour.
I think it was actually 38. I went back and checked, but between 35 and 40, we're going and phasing what looks like a car. Go ahead.
And they said, just keep your foot on the gas and don't let up. And we're doing that. And, I still wanted to hit the brake, but I didn't. And then the truck, the radar saw the car, and then that active braking pushed the brakes for you. And it stopped about 3 or 4 feet before this dummy car.
You definitely crossed that threshold in your mind saying, this shouldn't be happening. It definitely, that crossed my mind. You get past that point where you know something's supposed to be wrong, and then it kicked in. Was that similar for you?
And at any point, I know that I could have taken over. But I let it do its thing, its process of stopping before hitting the car. But I really wanted to put my foot on the brake. But in that sense, that whole demonstration really shows how well those safety features work.
Okay, we're back. I just want to mention that I know Paul would want me to mention that he went on to talk about how all of his training is really what makes a safe driver. That it was great to see those, but those are things it's good to know that he has in the back of his mind, but he has not counting on them, and I'm sure from the road team perspective, I want to get that across. So, Fred, you heard that reaction. Is that typical when you go through these demos? See, someone's been on the road a very long time, seen all sorts of things out there, but what is the reaction you generally get when you go through these?
Really, Paul's is typical. I mean, a lot of times drivers may come into the demos with the, I really don't need this technology, but when they see how it works, how it's valuable, and how it doesn't really take control away from them unless it's absolutely necessary, they really buy into it. Because, and that's the great thing about this technology is that we're not replacing drivers. Okay, it's driver assistance technology, it's not driver replacement. Safe drivers are still going to be needed, and as you and I talked about a little bit earlier, they're going to be needed for a long time. Okay, so yeah, it is really positive. So I wanted to take a second to step back too a little bit and touch on this roadmap to autonomous vehicles, because this is kind of our plan in terms of how we're looking at moving forward to get to eventually driverless. And as you can tell, first of all, from our time frame, we're still talking semi-automated, semi-autonomous applications as far out as 2021. And in fact, Frost & Sullivan did some research, and they really were showing level 4 technologies not out until 2030, 2035, and quite frankly, I think it could even be 2040 before we get into that. But the way we're going to get there is by building on top of active safety systems, like a fusion system. When you think about fusion, we've got sensors working together. Well, that's how we're going to get to autonomous vehicle. Camera and radar working together to help in collision mitigation, built on top of the stability system. So that's where we are today. As we move forward tomorrow in the next 5 years or so, we're going to really see advanced driver assistance systems. And these are going to be things like driver-supported platooning, which we'll talk a little bit more later. Things where we add steering control along with acceleration, deceleration control to help in lane keeping, and even select traffic applications. You could see the situation where a truck is in slow traffic, so the driver is able to flip a switch, and we keep the truck going through that traffic. So kind of a traffic jam assist application, if you will. Further out, a little past 2021, we'll start to get into more of these highway autopilot types of things. And it's really bad to say the word autopilot, but what this would be is where the driver is on, say, I-80 in Montana, able to put it into a control mode that really helps steer, drive, and watch what's going on, enabling the driver to either work on some other types of things during that application, or just maybe catch up on some phone calls or things like that. So that's where we're going. As we go through these systems, we start changing control. Today we're doing acceleration, deceleration, or longitudinal control. We add steering in the future. And then what really becomes important are the fail-safes, the redundancies in the system. And also, too, when you have a situation like a highway pilot type of scenario, suppose the driver does fall asleep. What are we going to do? Okay, well, in that case, if we can't wake the driver up, we're going to need to be able to move the truck off to the side of the road until we can get to the driver's attention. Because if you're like me, if suddenly you're alerted to something when that alarm goes off in the morning, I'm not real quick to react. And so if you're in the middle of a situation, the driver's probably going to need a little bit of time. So it's better to get us, if we can't wake the driver up, let's get off the road and then try to wake them up, get them back on.
We're going to talk about a couple of these possible scenarios about what could happen in a few minutes. I just want to pause here for a second, remind everyone that you're watching Live on Web, our masterclass on autonomous trucking. Our sponsor is the Freightliner Cascadia. You can send in questions, share at ttnews.com. You can put them right directly into this article page. As we prepared for this program, which has been 6 to 8 weeks in the making, it seems that a threshold had been crossed, and the level of interest, it always was there on some level, but a lot of it was, it's sort of, is this real, is it not? It feels like something has changed, and maybe it's our program, but chances are it's these NHTSA guidelines that came out recently. Generated a lot of reaction from the passenger sidecar, the trucking side about what are they, what do they mean, what do they say, and just as importantly, maybe what do they not say, and we have talked about it. I know you have really have dug into them, had a few takeaways that maybe you could briefly share with people that maybe are trying to figure out themselves what does NHTSA's guidelines mean.
Yeah, this is the government affairs side of my job, so that's what we're at. The Federal Automated Vehicles Policy is what they call it, and note that word automated, so some driver involvement still throughout the process. But really what NHTSA is trying to do here is technology is moving so fast. And let's face the fact, government regulatory processes don't move that fast. It takes some time. So what NHTSA did was they came out with the idea of guidelines to help kind of be flexible and nimble in the approach, but to give an idea to these folks who are developing these systems, the OEMs, suppliers like Bendix, and even these technology startups like the Pelotons and the Autos of the world, an idea of what their expectations are going to be. Now, while they're guidelines, they do have some teeth, because NHTSA does reserve the right to recall and use other regulatory actions that they have available today. So if you put a technology out there and you kind of don't follow the guidelines and they recall the technology, probably not a good thing to do. What's going to be key in these NHTSA guidelines is what they call the safety assessment. And this is a 15-point document that the developers of these technologies, whoever they are, okay, so it's not just the OEs, suppliers, technological supporters, even if a fleet comes up with a concept, they're going to be involved in being able to cover these. And so what they have to do is you have to file this, and NHTSA has even gone as far as to announce recently that they are going to actually promulgate a rulemaking next year to require this to happen. The other things that come into play as far as this policy goes, really quite interesting, is it covers everything, okay, from light duty vehicles to medium duty all the way up to heavy. So even though there's a great picture of a car on the cover of the guidelines, it applies to everything. And it also applies to level 2 automation and higher. So as companies like Bendix look at adding steering along with acceleration control, we're going to have to follow these guidelines and bring things into play. Besides just the suppliers, they've also talked about model state policy to help get some consistency on the guidelines across the state. And one of the interesting things in that is that NHTSA talks about the fact that states can license the human driver, but NHTSA is responsible for licensing the technical driver or the driverless system. So that interplay is going to be interesting. And lastly then, their use of current regulatory tools, as we talked about, recalls, and they're going to look to Congress to grant them some additional tools to be able to help them do this in the future. Last point, a flexible document. Even in the document, NHTSA talks about an update occurring probably within a year. So this is going to be a living document as we move forward.
And one that voices, trucking voice for multiple pieces of trucking passenger car, that there's going to be an opportunity for many different groups as this develops very, very rapidly.
Absolutely.
I'll mention how rapidly. I was just handed this not long before we started. Just this morning in San Francisco, DOT Secretary Fox announced that he will establish an advisory committee on automation in transportation, ACAT, A-C-A-T, so more alphabet soup for all of us to get used to. They're saying they will serve as a critical resource for the department in framing federal policy for the continued development and deployment of automated transportation. So I don't know much more than that, but wanted to share, piggybacking off the NHTSA conversation, that how fluid the situation is. We can't even keep track of it hour by hour anymore. Okay, let's pause here. We are going to get deeper into platooning very shortly. I have a lot of questions that are coming in that we have. We're going to get into platooning, which likely will be the first thing that we see in some sort of real life form out there. But another question we got quite often was who are the companies that are involved here? How many are there? The answer, a lot, and probably more than many people realize. So I want to bring in Seth Clevenger, TT's technology editor. Hello, Seth.
Hello.
Thank you for being patient
Good
with
to
us
join
for
you
a
guys.
few minutes. I'm going to turn it over to you to provide some insight as to just how far and wide this movement is.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Neil and Fred, and thanks again to all of you for joining us for this discussion of automated driving technologies, a trend that has the potential to reshape the transportation industry in the years and decades ahead. I was actually scheduled to have a small speaking role on this subject a couple weeks ago at ATA's Management Conference and Exhibition in Las Vegas, but I was under the weather and completely lost my voice the day before, so it feels good to try this again, this time with fully functional vocal cords. To continue this discussion, let's go ahead and take an expanded look across the trucking and automotive industries and review the latest developments in this emerging field. All of the Class 8 truck manufacturers in North America are demonstrating, developing, or researching automated driving technology in one form or another. Now, I think most of you will remember the unveiling of Freightliner's self-driving inspiration truck last year at the Hoover Dam. And back in March, parent company Daimler demonstrated an updated version of its highway pilot system that enabled 3 semi-autonomous trucks to form a platoon on the German Autobahn. Peterbilt, meanwhile, has demonstrated a self-driving truck using a prototype that uses lane keeping and a GPS navigation system to learn and repeat routes. Volvo is currently testing a fully autonomous truck in northern Sweden for use in underground mining applications. And just last week, Navistar demonstrated platooning technology on a test track in Indiana. The company is also involved in the University of Michigan's M-City facility, a simulated urban environment for testing self-driving vehicles. And as we've already heard here today, providers of active safety technology, including Bendix and WABCO, are also lining up to play a role in this market. At the same time, component suppliers such as ZF and Bosch have been developing automated steering systems and sensor technologies to support self-driving vehicles. Now, I saw some of these technologies firsthand earlier this year at ZF's Global Press event in Germany. The company demonstrated its evasive maneuver assist system designed to help drivers steer around a vehicle or obstruction in situations where the truck can't avoid a forward collision through braking alone. I also rode along in a ZF concept truck that showcased the company's highway driving assist function on a test track. The driver took his hands off the wheel and let the technology automatically guide the truck around curves and keep it centered in its lane, while also automatically accelerating and decelerating to keep a safe following distance from a passenger car on the track. Platooning, meanwhile, is also gaining momentum on the other side of the Atlantic. Earlier this year, 6 different truck manufacturers participated in the European Truck Platooning Challenge, where heavy trucks traveled in platoons on public roads in Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and Belgium before arriving at their destination in the Netherlands. That event, initiated by the Dutch government, was organized to show that platooning is possible and bring the technology a step closer to implementation. And as you heard earlier from Fred, many of the key building blocks of autonomous driving are already on trucks today. Active safety systems already incorporate automatic emergency braking to prevent crashes or reduce their severity. Adaptive cruise control can automatically adjust both braking and acceleration to maintain a safe following distance. We also have lane departure warnings. And the next step would be to add an automated steering function to turn those lane departure warnings into a lane keeping system. And really, you can even think of the proliferation of automated transmissions as part of this overall trend toward automating the driving process, in this case, shifting. So we're already into the early stages of this evolution, and we have been for a while. And we see the same thing happening in passenger cars. So just take a moment to think about the car commercials you're seeing on TV these days. What are they advertising? What are the selling points? More and more, car makers are promoting driver assist safety features, such as automatic emergency forward braking. And now we're also seeing them promote lane keeping assistance, which brings a limited active steering component into the mix. Active lane keeping assist is designed to prevent the vehicle from drifting out of its lane due to driver fatigue or distraction by taking corrective steering action to keep it centered. The driver must still be engaged with his or her hands on the wheel, but it's another safeguard and another step toward greater automation. Other automated driving features, such as parallel parking assist and traffic jam assist, are also on the market now. Increasingly, these types of driver assist features are becoming available not only on luxury models, but also on a growing number of mid-market passenger vehicles. So it's not just on the top-of-the-line Mercedes-Benz or a Tesla Model S anymore. The global passenger car OEMs all seem to be working on automated driving. For the car makers, technology really is becoming a key differentiator. It's a reason to buy a new car. Over time, this will provide economies of scale for the technologies used to support automated driving, especially the radar, camera, and possibly LiDAR sensors that detect and monitor the vehicle's surroundings. And that brings the cost of technology down for everyone, which could lead to faster adoption and the development of more advanced systems using a greater number of sensors. This also means that a growing number of Americans are going to be exposed to this. The motoring public is going to experience the technology firsthand, gain confidence in it, and become increasingly comfortable with it. And that really helps pave the way for more automation on commercial vehicles as well. And for this technology to take hold in trucking, I think we all agree that public acceptance of the technology will be essential. At the same time, technology companies have also been pushing the envelope in this emerging field. Google's driverless car project, of course, is probably the most famous example. The company has even shown a driverless car prototype that removes the steering wheel and pedals altogether. Uber, meanwhile, is developing self-driving cars in the context of ride-sharing. The company recently began allowing users to summon self-driving cars in Pittsburgh, although those cars still have a human in the driver's seat to monitor the vehicle. And Uber also recently jumped into the automated driving market for commercial vehicles through its acquisition of Otto, a startup founded by former Google engineers, which has been working to develop self-driving aftermarket kits for trucks. In another recent development, Mobileye and Delphi announced an agreement to develop a fully autonomous driving platform that they hope to have ready for production in 2019. So when you really consider all of this activity, it's quite evident that this pursuit of automated driving and driver assist technologies is the clear direction of the car and truck manufacturers and their suppliers. With that, let's go ahead and turn back to our panel for further discussion.
Thank you, Seth. As you can see, passenger car, truck, that this is happening. We have coverage on our website, ttnews.com. A colleague, Jonathan Reiskin, was in Indiana at Navistar event last week that involved some platooning. So this continues to develop. Let's talk about platooning here. This has been under development. It has slowly rolled forward. Peloton is one company that in particular has been working on this technology, has been one of the leaders, I guess, out there in media events. Josh Switkus, the president, co-founder of Peloton, was on the TT panel at ATA's conference. We have a couple slides and a video I want to show. I think he did a real good job of breaking down just exactly what platooning is. So why don't we start our deeper look into platooning by turning to the video clip of Josh, and we'll be back to talk about it further.
What you heard about a minute ago is platooning. The basic idea is to take the active safety systems that many of you are buying today. So you may be buying the Meritor Wapco OnGuard system, Bendix Wingman, or Detroit Assurance. Take those systems and connect them between a pair of trucks. So we have a direct wireless link between the two trucks. You can think of it sort of like Wi-Fi, but it's an automotive standard, much more reliable than Wi-Fi. And there's a constant communication link between the trucks. So whatever the front truck does, the rear truck knows about it basically instantly. So within about 1/100th of a second. So immediately when the front truck accelerates, we automatically accelerate the rear truck right along with it. When the front truck applies its brakes, we know about that immediately. We actually know about it before the brake lag has occurred. So immediately when the brakes are applied, we're sending that information to the rear truck. So we're actually typically braking in the rear truck before the front truck has slowed down. This is something even the best driver in the world, even the best sensor in the world can't do because there's nothing to sense yet, right? It's before that truck has physically slowed down. So this creates a very high level of safety. We can prevent the most common accidents on the highway, which are these frontal collisions caused by just not reacting in time. And we do this completely automatically. So if your drivers are not paying attention for a few seconds, if they sneeze, something like that at the wrong moment, the system will still react for them. This type of system and the underpinning of it, the collision mitigation system, has shown great safety benefits. There are fleets we've talked to who, when they added collision mitigation and lane departure warning systems, have seen an 80% reduction in accidents. So I encourage all of you, even outside of platooning, if you're not already looking into those systems, please do. They can have a profound safety impact.
Okay, we're back, and thank you, Josh, both for doing the panel. Peloton provided some information that I'll input a little bit later as we talk about some of the questions. They're not an active participant in our LiveOnWeb today, but we're kind enough to devote some time to try to provide some information. Fred over here, he has taken part in platooning demos. Bendix is involved. We're going to get into that in a sec. Why don't we go to a clip of Fred? He is part of this demo. Let's take a look at this clip, and we're going to come back, and Fred's going to tell us about what the experience was like and a little bit more about platooning. So let's go to that clip now. Okay, if you look very closely, if you've noticed today, that finger that you saw in that video, that was Fred's finger. That was him. So, all right, I'm kidding about that. But let's turn to Fred here. Why don't you walk us through a little bit what we saw, what went on there, and what that experience was like?
Well, it was my finger, but I was also driving too, so that's where the rest of me was at that point in time. So what we were taking a look at is, first off, Bendix is working with Peloton and has been working on, and you probably recognize some of the graphics. That was the Peloton system, which we are working with them, as well as with others in terms of platooning. But what we did in that particular case is we were engaging the platooning system. So as the driver, I flipped down the switch, and what the platooning system did was it first of all said we were too far, then it said we are ready for platooning, and then it brought the trucks together, okay, to about a 12-meter following distance, which is around 39, 40 foot, and we kept platooning at that distance for a bit of time. So the things that you saw is, first of all, that little monitor I wanted to point out. The monitor is also not only for bringing in information about the system, but it relays the video from the forward camera to the rear, the forward truck camera to the rear truck. So that rear driver, in that particular case, that was me, is able to see what's going on in front of the forward truck. The system is using the 5.9 gigahertz DSRC communications to work together to bring things into the platooning function. And one of the things you didn't get to see, but I did get to experience, which really impressed me about the system, was that when the truck in front of me, the brake lights would go on, almost instantaneously, my brakes were being applied to, again, help maintain that platooning distance between the vehicles. So it's a really impressive system, and it's still in testing. So we still have some work to do because demos are always great, but it's the real world where things get kind of screwy. So, but it is very impressive in terms of how it works.
So the North American Council on Freight Efficiency, they took part in our panel at ATA's conference, and just beforehand, they released one of their confidence reports on platooning. I'm not speaking on their behalf, but they were kind enough to provide us a few slides. I just want to quickly go through a few of their findings. The full report and some videos and other information is available on their website. Some of the benefits: fuel economy is always touted. Their findings, what they call real world, is about 4% on average. The front truck, I know at least in the demos of testing, the rear truck sometimes is talked about up to 10%. Lot of real world factors out there. You see them listed. What routes, what equipment is being used, congestion, all sorts of other factors. They were very open about challenges. They interviewed a wide range of people. ROI, we'll get into that in a minute. That's something, no matter what we're talking about, that's always important. How quickly would drivers accept it, especially the second driver? Maybe we'll touch on that in a minute. System security, Fred touched on that. Cybersecurity is always a growing question in this conversation. How reliable? I think my experience has been, at least in the demos and some of the real on-road that I've done and seen, I'm still here to talk about it, so that's a good thing. Some of their findings, recommendations, I do want to point out, this came before we were talking about it. Unfairly grouped as autonomous, the slide before. It will increase adoption of safety technologies. Some of these same themes that we have been talking about comes from their report. Driver stress less than perceived. That can. We've got some questions about it. Some I think might be a little skeptical of that, but that was their findings. They're talking to a lot of drivers, a lot of fleets. So again, that is NACFE. Their confidence report on two-truck platooning. I want to point that out too. We're talking about two-truck platooning, and we're going to come back to that in a minute as well. Why don't we also go to a slide that Peloton provided to quickly look at regulations in relation to truck platooning. This was provided a few weeks ago. I don't know any updates yet. As you can see, this map is pretty filled in. 10 states listed for approval. Michigan, I know, is one that's looking further at there's some pending legislation there. I don't think it's passed yet, but it still might this year to make it even easier there. Michigan is one state very interested in this. Nevada, you see states in process, different levels. A lot of this is about following distance. So following distance rules may be on the books, meant for safety, obviously. This platooning concept sort of changes the picture about, tailgating, what's thought of dangerous tailgating in a platooning situation may be safer. So on some, it's as simple as what is the letter of the law within that state. I'll mention where we did the conference in Nevada. They're a state, whether it be the self-driving, platooning, they're another example of a state very active, interested in nurturing this technology, working with the trucking industry, fleets, suppliers. And so the platooning is one area more than the driverless stuff where you see from that map. Things are developing quickly, and I'm sure it will continue to. In fact, and I want to turn it to the full panel now. Peloton made the case that in 2017, their system could begin to roll out, maybe in some limited applications, some real-world applications. Do you see that this could happen? You're involved on some level. I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but you're involved in these demos. Where do you feel that platooning stands right now?
So where I think platooning is it's getting to the point where we can do some real-world testing of the platooning system, meaning real routes with real fleets with real drivers, and to see what's going on. Because from my perspective, there's still a lot of questions that we have to answer about platooning technology. The impact on the driver, the impacts on the vehicle, the combination of maintenance and everything that goes into braking system and such from that standpoint. So I appreciate Peloton's optimism, but I think that more realistically, we'll see 2017 doing a lot of field trials and testing. That information comes back in, and that's really going to probably dictate the timing of a launch. Could be as early as 2018, maybe a little later, like 2019.
But things are happening here. There's no way around it. Even the biggest skeptic needs to leave here today understanding, at least on the platooning side, this is happening.
It is moving forward, and that's great. But I also think people sometimes get confused that, oh, we need to have platooning first before we get to autonomous vehicles. And really, they're parallel paths. Platooning is an application of autonomous or automated technology. And so that has an evolution path on its own, as does the automated to autonomous vehicle development. So we're not giving up everything at Bendix to focus in on platooning. We're focusing in on that, but we're also focusing in on how we improve our advanced driver assistance systems.
I think it also helps to keep in mind that this first generation of platooning that we've been talking about still involves active steering from the driver. So it's feet off the pedal, but still hands on the wheel and eyes on the road. That's going to be the first generation of platooning that we see in the relatively near-term future.
Yeah. So I'll jump in terms of what Daimler showed and Seth alluded to. I was in Dusseldorf in March, where they did a 3-truck platoon, and it was also autonomous platooning. It was a Peloton system for now, and they made very clear at the panel and otherwise. Everyone is steering, front, back, and they're focused on 2-truck. That is what the confidence report we talked about, and that's where we're starting. I think longer term, there will be continued advancements where you figure there would be some automated steering. Seth was in Germany on a separate trip and experienced that, and you figure possibly longer term there could be more than 2 trucks. What I experienced, and I was in the middle of 3 trucks, this was on a public road on the Autobahn. So there were other cars in the left lane, and on those roads they go by awfully quickly. It's not a myth, they sure do. I was in the middle one, driver hands, feet off the wheel, and what happened was the first truck was at the set distance. Behind us, a set distance, one of their cars, a Mercedes car, came and cut us off. I cut between the second and third. Not so much that there was a jarring stop, but enough that automatically, no driver assistance, automatically expanded back the distance. We followed on this Highway Pilot Connect. That's a system that Daimler Freightliner has. The Hoover Dam was, and then as soon as the car exited, automatically they came back and you watched the distance on the Highway Pilot Connect, looked in the mirror. The people in the first truck, I talked to them when we got out, they had no idea that this had happened. They almost regretted that they were in the first truck as opposed to what I was seeing. They went back, went up, no hands, feet off, and again, that's not where we are now, 18, 19, that was a demo, it was a real world, but it was a demo, but it does show that the movement, the possibilities that are there. I see questions coming in to stick on the 3 trucks. We are starting in 2 trucks. I know that at the Daimler one they talked about, hey, we could do as many as 10 trucks, hypothetically. That's a football field if you think about it that way. From Peloton, I talked to the Peloton executives. There is some sort of diminishing returns as you get further back. Some of the fuel economy you may lose. But you need to start with 2. That was their message. You need to start with 2. You need to do the steering. You need to show it's safe. You need to get acceptance, and then there are other possibilities. I see coming in, well, what about if there are 3 trucks or more in the right lane? How am I supposed to exit? Well, we need to work through this. I mean, there are sensors to say we're platooning. There are ways you can break out of the platoon very simply. You're not stuck in a platoon.
That's right.
You're not stuck there. You tap the brakes. You just get out of it. You're electronically linked, but it's not, otherwise you're fine. So all of those things are developing, but you talked about electronic, and I just wanted to bring up the 3 or more. That's a question we're getting. Let's go back to some of the braking questions in relation to this that we're getting a lot of. I see both on my screen and here. Let me throw out 2 to start. Will platooning have an impact on disc brake adoption? And also, sticking on the braking theme, what is the minimum braking system requirement for platooning?
So basically, air disc brakes have actually been doing really well on their own, but when you really come down to it, the air disc brake technology is the most powerful braking wheel end technology that's out there. Drum brakes are very good, but drum brakes are still susceptible to fade as well as other issues. Air disc brakes, though, very strong. So our expectation is that at the very least, the tractors are going to need to have air disc brakes in the platooning setup. Best would be to have it all the way around, but at very least the tractors are going to have it. The other thing too is in terms of brake functionality and things along those lines. One of the really important things that's going to come down in terms of brakes is going to be the maintenance aspect. Okay, because even with disc brakes, you want to make sure that those brakes and tires are in good condition, because if that system has to react to an emergency brake type situation, you want to be sure that both trucks are equipped and prepared to be able to do that. Stability is also going to be important in this case because, again, we still have two drivers, at least in this initial vision of platooning. So if the situation calls for it and the driver is able to swerve, he's going to do that, and stability is going to be important. And lastly, the collision mitigation technology. As Josh said in the video in his clip, the platooning technology utilizes the collision mitigation technology, the radar and the camera to work together. What's important about that is on that forward truck, for example, you want to be able to ensure that you could use adaptive cruise control to keep a safe following distance, or that if things go awry, there's technology that can hit the brakes on the front truck, then we'll apply the brakes on the back truck as that happens. So air disc brakes, good tires, good maintenance, that's going to be important for, especially in the platooning testing, and I see moving forward with it in commercialization.
Let's stick on the equipment theme here. A couple people have asked about, do you need an automatic transmission for platooning related to that? Can it be retrofit? You don't need some new vehicle. Can you just talk a little bit more about
Sure.
some of the other equipment related issues that need to be addressed?
Sure. In terms of the automated manual or automatics versus manual transmissions, doesn't matter. You can do platooning in either of those or any of those situations. In fact, I remember when I was out at Peloton, the first truck I drove in platooning was a manual transmission. What happens is, obviously, if the truck is slowing down, you're going to have to put the clutch in and change your gear in that case. But with everyone moving towards automated manual, automatic transmission technology, I don't think it's going to really be an issue because more and more fleets are going that way. And when you think about the technology you're going to need for true autonomous vehicles, automated manuals, automatic transmissions are really the route that we're going to go. I'm sorry for all the old truckers out there who love manual, but even those guys I hear really like the automated manuals. It is going to go that route. In terms, I'm sorry, I was just going to say in terms of retrofit, I think that's where you wanted to go next.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, actually, the technology will likely launch being retrofittable. But keep in mind, your dad's Mac from 1959, it's not going to get retrofitted for platooning, okay? It's going to have to be, more modern trucks with safety technology, stability, collision mitigation technology, obviously the J1939 operating can, for that to be retrofit. But we do expect the start of this will be retrofit.
Let me go. I have some more here that are coming in live. And with a gap of about 12 meters, that's about 40 feet or so we're talking about. How fast are you driving? So in your demo, or whether what you showed, what's the approximate speed? Are we talking about highway speed?
Yeah,
too,
we were
right?
doing 65
and
in that demo.
That was my experience. Just to be clear, I didn't mention that in what I've done have been approximate highway speeds. As I said, certainly not what was going on in the left lane when I was experiencing it. Some scary stuff over there. Fleet acceptance is an issue. A driver, and there's a separate on driver. That's a separate. So let's talk about fleet acceptance, especially. Do you foresee platooning to be done within a fleet or between fleets?
Okay. Well, let's start with the fleet acceptance. In our Fleet Council demo that we did last year, we talked to our fleets afterwards about what did they think in terms of stuff. And I was actually surprised that for some fleets, yeah, there is that possibility that this could be an option for them. For other fleets, not so much. So they weren't really interested in it. And when you think about it, where platooning works really good are for those fleets that have a couple of trucks that are moving from point A to point B and back and are usually running together. I mean, I think those are the fleets that are going to really start off with it. But when we get into, other types of fleets, again, probably van trailers, we haven't really done any testing on different types, but I don't imagine tanker fleets, I don't imagine they're going to be allowed to platoon because of the risk, two gasoline tankers running together may not be a really good idea. But that, that's where they're going to start, is with those types of fleets where it can work together.
So someone had asked about a flatbed benefit. I'll mention from what Peloton had sent in, feeling that flatbed is less than a box van trailer, less fuel economy, in relation to less rear drag. But again, it is possible. But a lot of this is about the right routes, the right fleets. Are they going to work together? I think some ATRI data in the past, I know they're working on a lot of stuff moving forward. It's a little dated now. That, hey, is our owner-operators going to be more likely to work with owner-operators, maybe? I mean, compared with fleet versus fleet. So who's going to be in the front, back with the fuel economy? I mean, there are a lot of these things still need to be worked out. But I think one thing we're trying to get across is this technology is moving forward. It's a lot of the peripheral issues that still need to be addressed.
Well, let's touch on that inter-fleet versus intra-fleet platooning. From our perspective, it's going to start within the fleet. So intra-fleet platooning is what's going to happen. The reason why inter-fleet platooning or fleets, platooning between different fleets, it's a great concept, but it's a difficult implementation because you don't know necessarily how good of a job Fleet A is doing on their maintenance or Fleet B is doing on their maintenance, what their trucks are like, what their driver training is like, and things like that. I would wager that for fleets, their chief legal counsels or their lawyers are going to say, if you want to do it together, great, but not with somebody else until some standards or some things get in that says if you're going to platoon, you have to do this. But the risk is pretty high, and as you mentioned too, it's the who goes in front, who goes in back. That can vary based on load, current weight of the vehicle, the braking system, a variety of things. So I think within a fleet where you could have more control, we'll see platooning blossom for those fleets that it works. Inter-fleet, much farther out there.
Yeah, I know Peloton has made the point that at launch they want to have that inter-fleet capability. So if there are two fleets that do want to team up and platoon together, that will be possible. But I do think that the general understanding is that this will probably first go to market and first be really used in intra-fleet applications.
Yeah, what we saw from our fleet council is that was probably the one question that almost all 25 members of our fleet council were pretty unanimous on. Now we're not going to run with other fleets if we're going to do platooning. So I think there's some work that has to be done to ensure the safety performance, and like I said, some standards that are going to be in place to make sure that if fleets are going to platoon together, these characteristics, air disc brakes, good tires, good maintenance, good driver training, those things are taken care of and certified.
Question that just came in, I just want to get to. Is there issues with controlling platooning between trucks with different powertrains? Different trucks, my understanding is they can work, OEM X and Y will be able to, as long as the system, they both have the system and it'll be set up.
Yeah,
Am I correct in that?
Yeah, for our demo, we were running a Peterbilt and a Kenworth in terms of things for, different drivetrains, different OE makes. That's not going to be an issue.
Last platooning question, and as we begin to wrap up, I want to get into have a little speed round maybe on a couple of the larger autonomous and futuristic questions. How does platooning boost driver productivity? You still need one driver, one truck. So why am I investing on all this technology for all this? How would I'll get to what Peloton is, we've talked about there. How would you answer that for someone saying, okay, you still need a driver, so
Yeah, so driver productivity, I think the vision on that is, the driver in the rear, maybe less or less stressed or a little more relaxed and can go longer. And there is some proof of that. We saw early on when we came out with adaptive cruise control, for example, that drivers would respond that they felt better at the end of their shift after using adaptive cruise control as opposed to not. So I think that might be where some of that vision comes in. Quite frankly, I think the productivity gains or the gains are in other areas. It's the fuel economy. It's helping to improve the safety. It's probably helping keep the uptime moving forward and such from that perspective, more so than driver. Where the real driver productivity, I think, comes in, as you saw, when you've got one truck that has two pup trucks, if you will, following behind it with no driver in that particular case. That's when you're going to really see that driver productivity shoot up.
You hit some of these bullet points pretty much dead on, so I'm going to go on to say.
And Josh and I did not talk before this.
No, I got this not all that long before we went on the air, but you really hit that on the head. One question. We had prepped a clip. One we get is about liability, is about insurance in relation to this. Who's responsible if something goes wrong? We're going to put up, when we're done, besides putting up our replay, we're going to put up a separate LiveOnWeb extra clip from the panel that we did at ATA's conference. It's about 5 minutes long. I found it very interesting. It's individually from Josh Switkus of Peloton, Anthony Lewandowski of Otto, and Sean Waters of Daimler, each taking their own perspective of their technology, of their development, and sort of providing, and there is no, much as some of the things we're talking about, there's no set answers yet, the guidelines, the rules. But for the many people that have sent in about liability, they had pretty direct answers, and I would encourage you to listen directly to what they have to say, and they're ready to stand behind, in short, they're ready to stand behind what they're developing, technology, equipment, whatever the case may be. So we're not going to be able to get to it. We are going to put it up. I would encourage the number of people that sent in about that question to take a look at that, because rather than hearing it from me, you might as well hear it directly from them. Just a couple other, leaving the platooning area, which we probably could go on for a long time, and that's a great thing, and how interesting and exciting what is transpiring in trucking is right now. Do autonomous cars have to be widely accepted before trucks?
That's a great question, and that's probably one that we're going to find out over time. But from my perspective, I do believe that, yes, autonomous car technology needs to lead the way. We talked a little bit earlier about my 5-year theory. If it happens on cars, 5 years later it'll be on trucks. I think that is going to be the case. Trucking makes a great case around the efficiency aspect of autonomous technology. But I think the bigger issues we have are the public acceptance. I think the public needs to get comfortable with the idea of autonomous vehicles, of driverless technology, before they're going to want to see it on their light vehicles before they see an 80,000-pound or maybe even 125,000-pound vehicle rolling down the road without a driver. So it may not be so much from the technology standpoint, as much as from the public acceptance. And I do think there is a cost play here too. Obviously, you build 15 million cars a year, build 300, 400,000 trucks. Getting that technology, getting the cost of those sensors down so the return on investment for the trucking industry is going to be important. And that's why I also think the auto industry is going to lead on that.
Is our infrastructure ready in relation to that? Does that mean we need things like, and I'm borrowing from our viewers with these great questions, is there a need dedicated technology-enabled highways? Is there a need for a national operations center? There are other terms thrown around. So where do you view, we talk about, we've done live-on-webs on road funding and crumbling infrastructure. Yep. So with that fight still going on, right? We have a highway bill now, but that's a whole other program. Is the infrastructure ready? What else needs to happen to make platooning or autonomous and one-day driverless happen?
Well, like you said, our infrastructure is not even ready for trucking today, so let alone in the future. But one of the things that NHTSA mentioned in the Federal Automated Vehicles Policy is that part of the reason for helping to move autonomous technology forward is the belief that maybe we can do more with our existing infrastructure if we have these autonomous applications. I'm always reminded of the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, and you might remember the cars were all autonomous, and they could travel within a foot of each other, zipping 60 miles an hour or so down the road. That type of thing could improve efficiency, which then could allow us not to have huge infrastructure builds, but getting more efficiency out of it. I think the important things that we need to focus on to help drive these autonomous applications, or even automated applications in the future, we need things like the roads need to be mapped properly. The roads need to have good, clear lines. We need to have infrastructure to vehicle communication. So if those lines are covered up, there's at least information coming in to let a vehicle know where it's at. These are some of the basic things that we need to have in place to really get to higher levels of autonomy and automation, and even then to get to driverless in the future. So that's where we really need to focus to start. And there may be some other things in there too, but I think the idea of separate lanes is good, and we may see that, but we really don't have the money to build those lanes. What I could see happening is there may be, as we talked about, HOV lanes that become automated vehicle lanes that allow that technology to go. That there could be roads and routes that are maybe dedicated solely to autonomous applications. So guys like me who would like to drive may have to take the long way, things like that. But I think all those things are going to come down the road. What would help us now is nice lines in the road that cameras can read, and nice information coming to the truck.
And that's a question. We're running out of time here, but we've gotten questions about the markings about that. You know, in snow and ice, we're not there yet, even in a demo state. I don't mean we. I'm not building
Absolutely.
it myself. I'm speaking, you know, in the larger we here. It does feel that some progress has been made in terms of recognizing pedestrians. That had been one of them. It feels like we're not fully there yet. I got one smaller object like animals. I know when I travel with my Canadian colleagues, moose always come up, and I'm waiting for someone to ask that. So they're not quite there yet, but even since it started in a really 24 months, maybe a little bit more, what about pedestrians? Well, we're not there yet. Might not be fully there, but they're getting there, and I think weather in relation to the markings, if it's a snowstorm, fog, rain, well, that's why we're going to have a driver. That's what we've been saying all along today. Is that a fair assessment as we begin to wrap up here?
Yeah, I really think so. I mean, as everyone has seen, all these videos and stuff are really done on beautiful days, and things.
People notice that.
Yes,
and that's why I just wanted to address it.
And that's good. And quite factually. We're going to need to get to a point where we're able to work in all conditions. To truly get to level 5 as SAE defined it, this is an autonomous vehicle that can work anywhere in any conditions, okay? So we're going to need to get there. But I think as we start to get there, you're going to see rules in place. You're not going to be running your platoon on an ice-covered roadway. Things like that. Those are going to be the basic things to start. We'll get there eventually, but it's going to take a longer time.
Just before I sign off, I want to go back. I mentioned earlier about this auto slide. This is, just to recap, this is one vision of something 30, 40 years down the road. So you see some of the cost savings from taking out some of the driver comfort, which is such a critical element. We've seen recently multiple new truck models being rolled out. Driver comfort, a major part of the selling points in the materials. So Anthony Lewandowski of Auto is on the panel. We have a clip we're not going to get to. We're also going to put that up as a LiveOnWeb extra. I encourage you to look at, to take a view of that and to see what he has to say as he looks 30, 40 years out. We spent some time with Seth after the panel. We sat down with him. He's an interesting guy. Has a very clear vision of where we're going. He sees that where we're going, but it acknowledges it's a long time in the future. But have a feeling we have not heard the last of the auto Uber, but that's a little bit down the road. That's a driverless, and I hope takeaway remains That's then, and we have this platooning and autonomous and these baby steps. And we're going to unfortunately have to wrap it up here. It went by very quickly. I'm sorry if we did not get to your questions. I have a feeling this is not the last time LiveOnWeb is going to be talking about this topic. I will mention, if you missed part of the show or just want to watch it again, a replay will be posted later on our website, ttnews.com, and at liveonweb.ttnews.com, along with the extras that I had been referencing. We may have a few goodies they did not mention. So we encourage, if you are interested in this, we have some things planned for you. I'd like to thank our guests, Fred Andersky of Bendix, and also Seth Clevenger of TT, our technology editor, for sitting in with us. Also want to thank our sponsor, Freightliner Cascadia, and our production team behind the scenes that helped make LiveOnWeb happen. Until next time, I'm Neil Apt, Editorial Director of Transport Topics. Thank you for watching.